All right, and we are live. Thank you everyone for the patience as we got our audio sorted away. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Danielle Patterson, Executive Director of Family Office at ISS Market Intelligence, and it is such a pleasure to have this conversation today. It's one that I've been looking forward to, as philanthropy is one of the most powerful ways families can express their values, their purpose, their legacy, and what they hope to leave behind. At the same time, it's also one of the areas where complexity, family dynamics, and uncertainty can make giving feel harder than it needs to be. So today we're focusing on a very practical question. How do families translate good intentions into giving that is thoughtful, aligned, and genuinely effective? To explore that question, I'm joined by two practitioners who have spent their time working directly with families, family offices, and foundations navigating exactly these decisions. First, I'd like to welcome Caren Yanis. Caren is a philanthropic advisor who works closely with ultra-high net worth families, family offices, and foundations to help clarify values and translate them into thoughtful philanthropic strategies. Her work focuses heavily on governance, cross-generational engagement, and helping families build structures that strengthen relationships rather than create tension. Earlier in her career, Caren served in philanthropic leadership roles with the Crown family in Chicago and Oprah Winfrey, helping guide large-scale giving initiatives grounded in purpose and long-term impact. Thank you, Caren. I'm so happy and grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Danielle.
Absolutely. Next, I would love to welcome Kris Putnam-Walkerly. Kris is globally recognized philanthropy advisor and strategist who works with family offices, foundations, CEOs, and major donors to increase the clarity and effectiveness of their giving. She's advised thousands of donors and philanthropic organizations over more than 2 decades. She is the co-author of Confident Giving and Delusional Altruism, which we have here, and her work has been featured in Bloomberg, Forbes, NPR, The Wall Street Journal, and Wealth Management. We're also fortunate to have Kris as a member of the Family Office Access community, and I couldn't be more grateful for this time we all have to share. So thank you as well to our live audience. We hold these live to address your questions. Let's make this fun and interactive. So please feel free to drop those in. We've got Cody behind the scenes who will do his best to insert those questions as they come up. We've also got Madison from our team who's working the channels. So to get started, I'd really love to just lay the foundation. You know, most families do not come to philanthropy with a lack of care or intention. However, in many cases, you know, they come with a genuine desire to do good, but they're trying to sort through values, family dynamics, timing, structure, and the practical question of where to even begin. So before we get started, I thought we would just get into the framework, some of the best practice. So we're kind of at a high level. So the first question I'll pass to Caren and ask, you know, when families first come to you around their philanthropy, where are they usually starting from, and what tends to feel unclear or difficult in those early conversations?
They're coming from an inflection point. And the families that I work with are all prepared to do something. They're not always sure what they want to do, but that inflection point I think about as liquidity. So a liquidity event has just happened, or a partial liquidity event, and there's pressure on families from other advisors to think about philanthropy. They come from a perspective of life cycle. Somebody's just passed, somebody has married into the family and says, wow, you have these philanthropic assets, what are you doing with them?
Yeah.
Or they come from the perspective of legacy. And on the legacy side, they're thinking about where they came from, whether they're wealth generators or wealth inheritors, and really looking to build that. And then there's a sense of cross-generational integration that's so important. You know, an idea of how do we work together as a family.
Yeah, incredible. And there's so many dynamics there, especially in the life transitions. You know, I'm sure a lot of unintended or unexpected, I should say, emotions. And so there's just a lot to sort through and sift through. So having, you know, a trusted guide, advisor to help them navigate becomes so pivotal.
It's really hard for families to do this by themselves.
100%. Well, Kris, I would love to also bring you in as well and to hear from your perspective, is the challenge usually around values, strategy, execution, or do you see it being really all of the above?
Thank you. And I just want to thank you also for your work and leading these events and for the work of Family Office Access. It's really remarkable offering and program. And I'm sure everyone that's a member that's participating here appreciates all that you do and bringing us together to have these conversations. So truly, thank you.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you. And yeah, it is Women's International Month, and so I should just say, I mean, I'm honored to lead conversations like these, and my joy comes from elevating voices like yours. So thank you both. Honestly, this is a treat, and I love that it falls on such an important month for us.
exactly. And as Caren just pointed out, families, it's hard to do this alone. And it's also hard for family offices to figure this out and for wealth advisors to figure this out. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn and improve our practices and the ways we can help families. And yeah, it's interesting. I totally agree with everything Caren said in terms of sort of the reasons or the ways in which families arrive. Another way that I see is they've been donating, they've been giving, but it's been reactive, it's been scattered. It maybe was to their alma mater or sort of the kind of like low-hanging fruit types of organizations. And they're wanting, for a variety of reasons, to shift from being more responsive as donors to more strategic and impactful. I had a client who described this as they want to go from giving in onesies, twosies to being more thoughtful about what do they actually care about. And so to
Mhm.
me, that's really where this sort of strategy and values and execution of that strategy comes in. I think about strategy as being very important, whether it's creating a family giving plan or developing your own strategic plan for your foundation or company. To differentiate them, there's strategy formulation, developing the strategy, and then there's strategy implementation, implementing it. And in the formulation side, that's really where I see a lot of the big questions coming in, like what are our family values? What are the issues that we care about? What kind of impact do we want to have as a family foundation or family philanthropy? What are the issues and causes that mean a lot to us? What kind of philanthropic family do we want to become? Do
Mhm.
we want to involve the kids and the grandkids or not? All these kind of questions that I think are really important. And that's, to me, part of the formulation of the plan, of the giving plan, of your giving strategy. And then how you implement that is the implementation side. And, you know, implementation is actually sometimes harder. As much work can go into developing your strategy or your plan, the harder part can be making sure the whole darn thing works and you
Yeah.
actually get momentum on implementation immediately. And that's a lot of the work that I do with my family clients, is helping them to develop those family giving plans, but ensuring that they swiftly move into the implementation phase.
Right, right. And I'd be curious, there's so many different ways, different structures that families can give. And so I'd be curious to know, in terms of helping them actually execute, do you advise on the best structure? And is there kind of a framework that people can follow? Or do you find with both of you, with the work you do, is there really no one size fits all? I'd be curious to hear.
First
Caren,
of
do
all,
you
I
want
want
to
to
start?
say Chris and I have never been on a screen together, so I'm really
Mhm.
delighted, Chris, to have an opportunity to be on
Me
the screen
too.
with you. And I echo her thoughts, Danielle, about your leadership here. It's bespoke. I have to say, it's
Yeah.
really hard and often clients will come and ask, how does this work? Tell
Yeah.
me what your general process is, and it's very specific to each family and what their goals are and what they want to get out of the engagement with an advisor. A lot of times people don't know what they don't know. And so it's an investigation process of working with families to kind of unearth what they really care about as a family. And sometimes it doesn't happen right away. It takes a couple of iterations.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah, I
And
totally agree. It is very bespoke. And as everyone on this call knows, every family is unique and different. But I would say one thing that is consistent for me that I found is getting clarity on what the goal is and thinking about what you want to accomplish before you figure out how best to accomplish it. And by that, I mean, like very specifically, getting clarity on, what kind of impact you want to have. Let's say you want to, I don't know, I'm making this up, like end homelessness. Well, great. Does that mean like in your town? Does that mean
right.
in the United States? Right. And so the scale at which you want to create change, will dictate how you go about your philanthropy. And I think too often a mistake that family offices make and wealth advisors and attorneys make is starting with the how. So so the family says, I want to create a foundation, and the wealth advisor says, great, I'll complete the paperwork and get that going for you, right?
Right.
Or do you want to have a donor advised fund versus a foundation versus some other vehicle? And to me, that's a secondary question. There's pros and cons to all of these, but to me, it's more important to figure out, well, what are you actually trying to accomplish? That could dictate whether a family foundation would make sense for you, or whether what your needs are more simplified and could be accomplished through a donor advised fund.
And just to add on to that,
Yeah.
typically, and I teach at the University of Chicago in a private wealth management certificate program for families. And after I speak, at almost every session, the question comes up: should I have a donor advised fund or a private foundation? And just like Kris said, what do you want to accomplish? But often private foundations are focused on family unity, and that creating a level playing field for families to come together, to learn together, to make decisions together, and figure out how that piece works in advance of engaging in any strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's done, it's much easier. But there's a fiduciary responsibility with a private foundation that is much heavier than there is with donor advised funds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, and the work involved to do it right, it almost becomes a business of its own. I am curious, with the donor advised fund, does it hold the same power to bring families together if people are very intentional and they have the conversations? Or I'm sure, again, there's no really one size fits all, but maybe in your experience, have you seen very thoughtful execution of setting up a donor advised fund where it hasn't just been the individual decision, but rather the whole family has had a say in how those funds are then distributed?
Kris, you want me to
I mean,
jump
I
in,
would say, it depends. I mean, there's no reason why you can't create a large donor advised fund and call it the Patterson Family Foundation.
Yeah.
And go about it in a way that is intentionally engaging your family and being thoughtful about decision making and funding areas and how you want to go about it. But I would say that the reality is most people are setting up donor advised funds to sort of immediately get a tax benefit and kind of park money until they figure out what they want to do.
Yeah. Yes.
And then are being philanthropic from it. Creating a family foundation, as Caren mentioned, like a challenge is like you're creating a nonprofit organization that needs to be managed. There's tax implications, there's IRS rules to follow, there's penalties if you don't do the right thing or do the wrong thing. But just in the fact that it forces you to create a mission statement, it forces you to create a board of directors. And so I think it kind of sort of emphasizes the need for engagement or the need for decision making around who's going to have what role and responsibility and how our decisions going to get made, that I think it does lend itself to family engagement more. But again, only if it makes sense for you to navigate having a nonprofit that you're managing, and who's going to do that. And that's a great role for family offices to play.
Yes.
Is that
Totally.
back end management of that organization.
100%. It sounds like it needs support, very thoughtful execution, discussion, the right players. Do you have family members or do you hire? All such important.
Do you want to bring people in from outside to sit on your board? Do you want experts on your board if you have a private foundation? And just to build on what Kris said, I think there are lots of different sources of philanthropic capital, and they do have to follow the purpose of the foundation, what you're trying to accomplish both internally, even if it's just an individual. What do I want to do for myself? How do I want to think about my philanthropy writ large? Or for a larger family, but we have private foundations and donor advised funds and charitable remainder and charitable leave trusts. We have insurance policies that people use for philanthropy.
Oh, wow.
There's all kinds of really wonderful ways that family offices can engage in thinking about the assets that are available for philanthropy, and doing that in a really thoughtful and deliberate way so that you're not boxed in. But the other point I wanted to make is most of the families that I've worked with have multiple sources of philanthropic capital. There may be a donor advised fund and the framing of this can be really fascinating for families. If there's a private foundation that everybody's involved in, and the question is, are you going to make decisions by consensus? And mom and dad want to have their own giving vehicle. That's great. Maybe each one of the other trustees has their own staff and makes grants to things that they care deeply about, but when they come together at the board table as a family foundation, they make collective decisions using consensus as a driver.
Mhm.
It sounds like communication plays such an important role in, having these conversations, bringing all the various players to the table. And in the work that each of you do, are you facilitating these conversations? Do you ever bring in outside advisors? And I'd love to know, because so many people talk about the importance of the wealth transfer and bringing in the next generation. I'd love to hear your thoughts around engaging the next generation.
Yeah, that's such a huge question, an important question, an all-encompassing question, right? Because
Yes.
communication is everything, really,
Yeah.
in terms of ensuring that the family is fully aware, understanding of the wealth and understanding of the systems and understanding of the family's mission and goals, and what you're trying to accomplish as a family and what your values are as a family. That all needs to be communicated. And certainly in philanthropy, the donor's intent of what you want to happen with this family philanthropy, how you want future generations to be engaged, creating and communicating a structure that is clear as to what you want to accomplish, but also flexible, because we don't know what's going to be happening decades from now, and future generations will be living very different lives than we're living today. And so documenting some of that flexibility. In fact, I was just
Mhm.
facilitating a multi-generational family philanthropy retreat, family foundation retreat,
Oh,
a few
wow.
weeks ago, and it's a Catholic family. So the donors, who are no longer alive when they started the
Okay.
foundation 50 years ago,
Wow.
wanted to have Catholic identity as an important part of the foundation. But looking ahead, thankfully, the donor was mindful enough to recognize that being Catholic didn't need to be a requirement for future family members to participate. So, meaning, and he specifically said, I don't want you guys policing each other as to who's Catholic. Are you going to church every Sunday or every other Sunday,
Right,
whatever it
right.
might be. And so he intentionally created that flexibility of, it's important to infuse Catholic values into our grant making and into our work. And of course, we do want to fund Catholic organizations, but it doesn't need to be the church. It could be like Catholic charities. It could also be other religious based nonprofits. But he documented that. So
That's
now, literally
incredible.
50 years later, we're pulling out those documents and saying, hey, this is
Wow.
important. We need to figure
Yeah.
out, because now there's 300 family members all over the country, and
Wow.
a good portion of them are not Catholic. And
Yeah.
so how do you continue to support and continue the foundation to guide that legacy and to live that legacy of Catholic identity that was important to the donors, without hamstringing everybody and without forcing people to do certain kind of things? And so now it's a coming together of figuring out, well, what does Catholic identity mean to us now? And for the family who I talked to, the trustees, it's much more about values,
Yes.
about being a good person and helping others. So I do think it is having that clarity as you're starting the foundation, but also documenting it, but building in flexibility and recognizing that we don't know what the future will hold.
Contextualizing values across generations. So being able to, and this is so important for estate planners that are working with family offices, or the estate planning function within a family office, is to understand the long-term implications of the decisions that you're making now. And
Mhm.
often family members think across generations that the next generation doesn't fully understand their values, but they're contextualizing often the same values just to their generation and to what's happening in the world. So being mindful of that as we develop documents that are going to guide generations in the future can make an enormous difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, it's honoring the history, the values, but yes, realizing, and especially in this day and age, the world is evolving so
So
quickly.
quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, you shared an amazing example of the way that you helped a family navigate some really opposed values. It almost seemed, but you found a way to really listen to and care for each of those voices and find solutions. Now, obviously, we don't need to name names, but I just thought it tied in so beautifully to the example that Kris shared. Would you be willing to touch on that, where you found just really unique solutions for families who sometimes were divided, but yeah, with
Yeah.
thoughtful conversation, everyone can win.
Yeah. You know, coming at philanthropy with different values. I mean, often someone from a family office will call, and I've had this happen multiple times, and say, I'm not sure anything can be done about this. I've taken these steps. And that was to let the family know that we've set up a private foundation, and everybody in the family can have X amount of money, go away, figure out how you're going to use it, bring it back to the table. And then there was some kind of an eruption. People disagreed about things. They weren't on the same plane in terms of what they wanted to fund. And there needs to be a lot more foundational work done before that happens. And some of that foundational work is about creating a meeting agreement. How are we going to show up?
Mhm.
Creating a process and having everyone agree on how decisions are going to be made. So if I'm a generation 3, is my voice going to be heard in the same way as my grandfather's voice or my grandmother's voice? And I want to know, coming to the table, whether or not I lean in.
Yes.
And yes, there have been families that disagree intensely, but find some nugget that's come from a different generation. So often we'll look back, even if the prior generation weren't, even if they weren't wealth generators,
Right.
what did they believe in? Where did they give? And we found that there are people who were living in very impoverished circumstances, and being able to take the life and legacy of that pre-wealth generation member and really honor what they went through by creating a strategy around that.
Wow.
And that's something that, and allowing for all of the things that people disagreed on to come
Mhm.
together under one roof, under the auspices of taking care of children.
Wow. I mean, it's
Mhm.
beautiful. It's beautiful the way it can honor, yeah, past generations and then carry into the future. I think, it's so many traditions are lost when you don't really take time to reflect and bring those forward. I would love, when you mentioned, Caren, the importance of having that foundation. It does take time and intention. And Kris, you mentioned you had just gotten back from a family retreat that you had planned. I'd love to hear what goes into that, and is that something that you recommend? At what stage of developing your plan to get on the same page?
All stages, I would say, right?
And how often? And yeah,
It's like voting, early and
you're giving me
often,
such
right?
great ideas. Yeah.
Um, I think certainly as you're kind of coming together and developing your plan, that's a great opportunity to bring people together. Although I will say, I have one client, a couple in Silicon Valley that had, not surprisingly, they told their wealth advisor, I want to create a family foundation. The wealth advisor did. And then suddenly they had a foundation. And then they turned to me and said, now what do we do with this?
Yeah.
We don't know what to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I asked them was, do you want to involve your kids, your adult kids, who are like in their 20s? And you know what they said? Yes, but not now. And I think that's an
Mm.
important distinction, because they kind of wanted to get their own act together and their own philanthropy first and kind of get their
Yeah.
head around this
Yeah.
before they engaged their kid. That didn't mean the kids were going to have to fall in line and fund what they wanted to fund, but they weren't quite ready yet to bring everybody in. So I just say that as a caution, because we all, I think, naturally jump to, let's bring in the next generation. But I think it's important to sort of test the readiness of the donors as to whether they're ready for that. But I'm a big believer in families creating family giving plans. I have a free masterclass for anyone that might be interested in that, to help families, and in particular women, to create family giving plans, to shift from being scattered or reactive or just stressed out about it, overwhelmed, to having clarity and a plan. And so that certainly involves not necessarily coming together for a full day retreat, but it would be coming together, whoever that is, yourself, your spouse, partner, or the family, and asking questions like, what kind of philanthropic family do we want to become? What kind of impact do we want to have as a family? And where do we want to have that impact? And on what issues? What are those causes that are meaningful to us? And how do we want to make a difference on them? Because you can have different kinds of impact depending on what you're trying to do, from a policy perspective, a direct service perspective, a, statewide, local, global. So digging into questions like that, digging into, how do we want to be involved? Do we want to be also volunteering? Do we want to be visible or behind the scenes? Do we want to lend our name and our reputation toward this issue and cause to kind of help signal the importance of this? Or are we not quite ready to do that? There's lots of questions like that. So getting clarity on that, and also, then once you have clarity of that vision and the values, then thinking about, well, let's kind of begin to implement this. So how much money are we talking about? Do we want to have a foundation or a donor advised fund? What are the vehicles? How will decisions get made, as Caren mentioned? How are you going to find the organizations to support? And so that's, I help families create what I call a 12-month giving roadmap. So now that you have your giving plan, what do the next 12 months look like? And how do you move from where you are today, which could be we have no idea who to give to, or we've actually been giving to organizations that we think we want to support, but maybe support differently. How do you get from where you are today to where you want to be in the next 12 months?
Wow. And I've watched your 3 simple steps to creating high impact giving family plan. It's this amazing masterclass, so well done, because it's easy to digest and it's actionable. You're not just telling in theory, you're giving people the steps. And I like your example of the family where the husband and wife decided, let's just start with us, don't bite off too much more than you can chew. I think it will be, what do they say? Paralysis through over analysis. And I'm sure that's, people probably get in their own way or just get overwhelmed. So I really love that you help guide them through, but it's really driven to see results.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Madison is in our audience. I'll ask that she drop that link for everyone to enjoy that resource. It's incredible.
Oh, great.
And one of the concepts you brought up was the difference between doing good and doing well. And are you able to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and it's one of the concepts I bring up in my book. So my most recent book is called Delusional Altruism, and it is there's Danielle with her coffee. Thank you. And I really wrote it to help families and foundation leaders of all kinds recognize that yes, you want to make a difference, you want to change the world, you are altruistic, you want to do the right thing, but you're often getting in your own way and preventing yourself from having the impact you want to have, and often don't realize that that's happening. And so, so the book is really about, what are these mistakes that all of us make, and how can you do things differently to be more transformational in your giving and to have greater impact. And a couple things that come up in terms of the doing good versus doing good well. One idea is having a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And I think this is really one of the biggest problems in philanthropy is kind of this misguided belief that supporting nonprofits to maintain like a very Spartan operation means you can give more money to the issues and less to the organization that you're supporting. Or it comes up and that shows itself in things like, oh, this is a great nonprofit because only 1% of the money donated goes to overhead or goes to administration, and 99 cents of every dollar donated goes to help the people. And it's short-sighted because it seems altruistic. It seems like you're being prudent, but actually what you're doing is really holding that nonprofit back from being able to be effective because honestly, it's not really accurate. It's not actually happening. And just think of any business, like any business. Could you imagine running the business on 1% of your revenue? Like think of all the staff, all the personnel, hiring, retention, upgrading your cybersecurity, upgrading your technology, business development, R&D, all the things, right? That costs money. You need to invest in yourself as a business to be able to grow. And especially those of us who have grown businesses from nothing, you're investing money you don't have at the beginning, but it's important. You can't grow if you don't invest and you don't invest in yourself and in your team. And so I think it's important to recognize that nonprofit organizations that you're supporting are the same. I mean, they are corporations.
Yeah.
Did you want
Can
to
I build
chime in,
on that?
Caren?
Yeah,
Let me
please.
chime in because it's such an interesting topic. There is an inherent power imbalance between donors and nonprofit organizations. And for a donor to enter into a relationship with a nonprofit organization as the dominant force when the nonprofit has all the expertise is not satisfying for the donor either. So, and the nonprofit is not going to necessarily tell you the truth if you're in a relationship that's inherently imbalanced. So working with families to understand how they can learn from nonprofits. And for my clients, that starts well above making donations. It's more about finding a void in an issue that they care deeply about. So thinking about demographics, geography, and modalities. So
Mhm.
who do you want to help? Where are they? And Kris mentioned this. And then how do you want to help them? Is it direct service? Is it
Yes.
policy work? What experience do you bring? Not just what finances or financial resources do you bring, but what actual intellectual capital and social capital, which Danielle, you mentioned before, do you bring to the table that you can deploy in building a true partnership and looking at the ecosystem of organizations that are out there, talking to academics, finding out what solutions look like, and then moving from that transactional philanthropy to truly transformational philanthropy that brings families really close together and helps them realize impact as they're working.
Wow. Beautiful from both of you. And Kris, I felt like your book, you're speaking to philanthropy, but the abundance and scarcity mindset in general is just such an important lesson. And
Mhm.
I'm encouraged by the collaboration I see in the family office world right now, and people wanting to educate and be the best versions. And I've always wondered, for finding resources and deciding, do I reinvent the wheel and create something all on my own? Or is there another organization that exists that I can support and maybe collaborate with? Where should people go? Are there resources for people to learn very um, easily what organizations are out there? Are there resources that either one of you recommend for people eager to learn and just educate themselves?
Well, there are advisors who are issue area specific. So if you're a family that's really interested in fresh water, in the Great Lakes,
Mhm.
in land preservation, there are advisors who have spent a lot of time working in those areas who can be really beneficial. And so there's that to think about. There's the National Center for Family Philanthropy, which is a phenomenal resource. Um, there are half a dozen others that are really good, depending, but organizations like Tiger 21
Yeah.
offer philanthropic education
Yeah.
through some of their events, and those kinds of conversations with peers are just phenomenal. They're really great for people to learn.
That's
And
incredible.
they're also great resources because you can save a lot of money and time and frustration by taking a step back and learning.
Yeah.
So
Right.
to Karen's point, do we start a nonprofit or do we start an organization versus do we find one? It's very common for people who have a passion, maybe they or their family member had a health condition or some kind of issue, or they're a professional athlete. This happens a lot with athletes, where they were part of a mentoring program when they were a kid, and they attribute that to being the thing that got them through and why they got to be who they are today. And now they want to give back, which is amazing. And they do that by they start a nonprofit mentoring program, or they start the mental health program. And while that's great and that could be the right solution, you've now created a nonprofit organization that needs to be cared for and fed.
Like a
You need to
business.
raise other funds. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, when you're the donor and you start an organization and you're wealthy, it's hard to raise money because everyone else thinks, well, why should I donate to it? You have all the money, right?
Yes.
And so it actually
Yes.
becomes more challenging.
Yes.
But I think it's important to look around and say, does this exist someplace else? Does this service exist? Or is there an organization that already is doing a great job in the community that I could fund them to add this component to their existing work, but they already have the nonprofit infrastructure and staffing and capacity and reputation in place to be able to pull it off.
There
And
are
so I think that's where there's,
1.9. There are
go
one.
ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kris.
No,
Yeah,
no.
no, go for
Yeah.
it.
There are 1.9 million nonprofits in the United States. And I
Wow.
mean, it's mind blowing how many there are.
Yeah.
If you have a child with ped cancer and you've got some resources and your child, and you want to honor your child, you're very likely to want to start a nonprofit organization and then realize a few years later how much work it actually is. And there are some phenomenal organizations out there. I have a client who was very much in that space where their child had pediatric cancer during COVID. And they realized how difficult it was to go through the process, and they wanted to help other families.
Yeah.
And so worked with existing organizations to create programs that the organizations were really interested in creating inside an existing organization. So partnerships, thinking about financial toxicity in pediatric cancer, something that a lot of people haven't paid close attention to, and and coming at it from a couple of perspectives. One, just setting up funds so that ped cancer families could have a mortgage payment paid for. And the nonprofit does that. So there's a fund at a nonprofit for people for families who are on the edge of moving into poverty because they have a sick child. And then
Wow.
the other one, thinking about structures that can help support families with ped cancer. So
Mhm.
coming at it from both sides, but really thinking deeply about what it is you're good at and how
Yeah.
you can be transformational in your work.
Oh, it's amazing. And helping kind of bridge that gap in people finding the organizations they care about if they're not ready to create one on their own. It's, not just giving monetarily, but like we said, with some of the other things you can contribute, even your time. And if you're entrepreneurial, maybe you can help, the organization itself, but it's a matter of collaborating and finding each other. And that's where, yeah, it's wonderful to hear about some of the resources you shared for finding. That's amazing. 1.9 million.
1.9 million, yeah.
Wow. Well, we've spoken a lot about things that we can do to help, in terms of structure and support and education and communication. On the flip side, what are early warning signs, just for when you see philanthropy go wrong or when things are just simply misaligned?
Well, I think about a couple things. One is the sort of my way or the highway approach to philanthropy,
Yeah.
both within the family and also to the point that Caren mentioned, like with the grantees or the nonprofits you're trying to support. So
Yeah.
because there is a power dynamic really in all cases, right? The patriarch, the matriarch of the family who has the wealth, there often is family dynamic, power dynamics. And so recognizing that yes, you made the money and you created the foundation perhaps, but if you really want this to continue for multiple generations that aren't even alive yet, right? Then you have to think about how do you incorporate and bake in flexibility and engagement and inclusion
Mhm.
among
Yeah.
your family into your philanthropy and really allow that to take hold and to flourish and to help your foundation to thrive. I mean, when I mentioned this multi-generational family retreat that I facilitated, there's 3 generations who age range in age from 25 to 75 on the
Wow.
board. And I had them do a visioning exercise to think about what does the next 50 years look like, 50.
Yeah.
Well, most of the people in the room aren't going to be alive then, myself included, I don't think. And so it really forces you to think about how do we prepare now for people running this thing that aren't even alive, and we're not going to be around to help guide them. And so it really kind of helps you realize that we need to put practices into place now to make sure that this will be successful. And if you have a my way or the highway approach, that's not likely going to resonate. And then to the point that I think we've all made so far is this transformation versus transaction. And so really thinking first about what's the change you're trying to see or trying to create, even within your own family. One of my favorite clients, his legacy was, I want my children and grandchildren to experience the joy of giving,
Mhm. Yes.
because he's like, I experienced that joy,
Yeah.
and I want my kids and grandkids to experience that joy. I don't care what issue they want to support, it can whatever, but like feel the joy of knowing you're making a difference in other people's lives. And so to me, that's the transformation that he envisioned. And so it's less about the transaction of how many grants, how often, donor advised fund versus foundation, um, you know, Do we give restricted or unrestricted grants? Those are all decisions that are important to make.
Right, right.
But it's too easy to jump to those tactics because it's a decision you can kind of check off your list. The more important questions are the transformational questions.
Exactly.
And transformation happens in families. Unchecked, it's not, and everybody on the call understands this. It's not unfamiliar to have a family member be a major conspicuous consumer, to have drug or alcohol problems, to be very dissatisfied with their life. And philanthropy generates purpose that is absolutely transformational for ultra high net worth families. It creates communication, it creates empathy. It helps wealth inheritors move past that imposter stage that I hear a lot from the emerging generation. I didn't make this money, I'm not sure I can give it
Oh,
away.
right.
And the fact is, everybody's got some of both. Some
Yeah.
entitlement sense and some undeserving sense. There's this really beautiful proverb that says, everyone is born with two pockets, and in each pocket there's a note, and in one pocket there's a note that says, I am but dust and ashes, and in the other pocket there's a note that says, I am, the entire world was made for me. And the theory is that wisdom is knowing which note to pull out of which pocket at any given time. And so thinking about using those skills in philanthropy and really developing your own sense of confidence around the fact that as a philanthropist, you can use skills that you didn't even know you had, that can impact somebody else's trajectory or a community's trajectory for decades and eons. And that's really very powerful. So that's one of the ways, developing empathy is one of the ways that families, that's the green light. That's how families know they're being successful.
Yeah.
Engaging a 24, 25-year-old in learning how to run their family's philanthropy. And over the course of just a couple of years, seeing someone go from, I'm not sure I can do it or I deserve it, to being one of the leading experts in their community in the particular field that they're working in is so unbelievably exciting.
Just
And it's
transformative on so many
transformative.
levels. I mean, teaching to be a leader through such a wonderful and impactful avenue.
And having empathy and understanding for each other, which a lot of times family members don't have. We come to the table with expectations. When I was a 14-year-old, my 17-year-old brother pulled my hair at Thanksgiving, and I have never forgiven him for that. Right.
Right.
And he still does that. But being able to show up with in a very different position. And sometimes that's tactics that are as simple as having G3 call their G2 parents and aunts and uncles by their first name
Oh, wow.
around
Yeah.
the board table. Little things that start to shift the hierarchy
Yeah.
or really indicate that there's a professional operation going on here, and we're not just at the breakfast table having conversations and that are based on expectations and assumptions that we have about each other. This is about something bigger.
Wow. And it's huge, it just gives the opportunity to not only make impact, but like you said, create joy, create strength.
Yeah,
And when
create joy.
families are strong, they can be examples for others and great leaders. And it's amazing the way that you help support these families to really shine, and then the way they encourage others.
And just to bring it back, it affects the business too. It
Yes.
affects the family business. It affects the
Yes.
family office to have people who are leaning in to philanthropy and really building their own skills. It creates a much more peaceful environment overall if these skills are built on the front end.
And there's a family foundation I know of that they made the money through a family business, and the business is still operating, and they chose intentionally to run their family foundation like a business.
Yeah.
And so, meaning, it has professional staff. They're taking themselves very seriously. Board members have to deliver on what their roles and responsibilities are. They're taking it very seriously to that point, and making sure that it's as effective as possible. I also think a lot about, we're in the middle of this massive intergenerational transfer of wealth, and really the power of philanthropy, and to what extent a lot of that money can be unlocked toward philanthropy, and to ensure that that is happening as effectively as possible, so that those decisions that are made are thoughtful, not reactive, but planful and goal-oriented, and generating as much impact that can be had, because the ripple effect really on your community, on the country, on the world is really massive. And helping families, and there's a huge role that family offices play in this, and really ensuring that you're having these conversations and you're helping your clients establish their family philanthropy in a way that it's kind of mindful and present, and has a plan, that you're implementing and executing on that plan, that you're thoughtful in how you're engaging your family and making decisions. The impact you're having on the world is really incomprehensible.
Wow. Amazing. And I love the way it goes back. It helps business. It's a win-win all around. There was an audience question earlier that I'm curious to hear from either of you. Sometimes we did a lunch and learn like this around donor advised funds in particular, and how sometimes the pitfall can be that it becomes an easy vehicle and then they just get stuck there. And in the work that you do, are you ever just trying to inspire and find new solutions to move that money? You know, it's there, and helping them find meaningful avenues.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is a challenge, although there's also data that show that people are giving money out of their donor advised funds at higher rates than they're giving out of their foundations.
Significantly.
As a private foundation, you're required to give away 5% of your assets a year, roughly. And so there's many donor advised funds, many that are giving it 16%, 20%. And there's many donor advised fund sponsors that are requiring their DAF holders to give the money away. And they'll start with reminders, and then if there's no response, they'll start giving your money away for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, which I think is great. You know, it's all very upfront, you know, and clear.
Yeah.
But again, to me, it comes down to having a plan and having clarity on what you're trying to do with that money and how you can implement it. I think sometimes it just can feel very overwhelming. And my goal as an advisor often is really trying to reduce the overwhelm and to kind of simplify things and help people have a system and a structure that they can implement that makes sense, and making sure they have the capacity, if that's bringing in their family office team or a wealth advisor or a part-time assistant or a family member, you know, whoever it is. Because I think Caren's point is a great one. You know, that example of a family member who could take this on as their job is great. So just how do you have the capacity, and how do you make that happen, and just getting over that hump of fear and insecurity, and I think is an important one.
It's iterative. These foundations, family foundations, build in iterative ways from how are we going to meet together at a table, and what are the rules? How do we create the parameters and the expectations for ourselves in these meetings, to to what are we looking at as far as impacts is concerned, and how are we going to name it? Are we anonymous, or are we showing up with our name on everything? How do we communicate across a large family? It may be that there are family members who are really interested in being anonymous, and others who who don't care so much about what the money does, but want their name on something. And just bringing all of that together and creating an agreement around it is a great first step.
Yeah. Wow. And listening to all the voices, and finding harmony amongst them. We have two members who have different DAF platforms that help make giving easier and connecting to the different causes. And I just think it's really encouraging to see some of these advancements and technology now relating to, those just making it more seamless and also engaging the digital generation. I'm curious from your end, what other advancements are you seeing? Are there things you've seen over, say, the last 5 years that have shifted? And then I'll ask as well what you're most excited about in the near future.
I think the whole ecosystem of philanthropy is in the process of shifting. We used to be really focused on proof of concept. A foundation could go in, create something, and then the government would come in and fund it from behind, and that's not happening in the same way anymore. So philanthropy is changing pretty dramatically. We're also looking at large language models and ways to generate information that's very different from what we've been accustomed to in the past. And there's a lot of impact going on. There's a lot of PRIs and MRIs out there that that help families make really sound investments with great returns, but that may do things like remove phosphorus from lakes and resell the phosphorus to fertilizer companies. I mean,
Amazing.
things that are just unbelievable, that help protect the things we want to protect in a way that's in a way that's marketable.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And a couple of things that I see. One is a willingness to, there's a term and a kind of a movement in philanthropy called trust-based philanthropy. And really the idea is, how do you, as a donor, as a funder, trust the organizations and the communities that you're trying to support, and really learn from them and lean into them and ask them, like, what do you need? How do you need it? How could I be a good partner and supporter to you? And recognizing that they're the ones on the ground doing the work, and they often know what the needs are. And so rather than as you as a funder saying, well, I think you should be doing this, it's taking on a more listening approach and saying, what do you need, and how can I make this as easy as possible for you to be as successful as possible? So I think that's really important. And then another trend I'm seeing is really around succession planning and even sunset planning. You know, there is this generational transfer happening, and helping be more thoughtful and intentional around how do you ensure that subsequent generations are engaged, involved, interested in ways that are meaningful to them at their life stage and age, which evolves and changes, you know, for all of us. And how do you really pass that baton effectively, or even decide, you know, we actually want to spend all of our assets now on philanthropy and give this away in our lifetime. Either because we want to experience the joy of that, or because there's a lot going on in the world and it could use our help.
It's beautiful. Well, before we close, I'd love to give each of you just a moment to share if there's anything you're currently working on that our audience should know about, and also where we can go to find more. You know, Caren, I know you're always educating and speaking, and Kris, just the masterclass. We'll make sure that that's in the comments. But yeah, I'd love to know, or is there another book in the works? So I'll either one of you take the lead. I'm curious to know.
Go ahead, Caren.
The Women's Philanthropy Institute is hosting an event March 31st and April 1st in Chicago. I'm an advisor on that board, and so that's a really exciting event that's coming up. There's SOCAP in Chicago in June, which is about investments. National Center for Family Philanthropy, as mentioned, there's some really great resources out there, and there's a lot of wonderful research on particular issues. So that's great. And Willie School of Family Philanthropy trains family members. So does the University of Chicago in their executive education program, in private wealth management. That's a fabulous program. So just thinking about where those resources are and engaging.
Thank you for sharing those. I'll circle up to get the details for the event. We'd love to add that to our calendar. It sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll second, all of those, but especially the National Center for Family Philanthropy is, as it sounds, a phenomenal resource. They do a lot of great research that's very practical and usable for families. I use it all the time. And I'll also just mention again, this free masterclass it's on demand. So it's about creating a family giving plan. And I'm working on a course on the same topic. So really helping families, ultra high net worth families, and especially women, to create family giving plans and to be able to implement them. So that should be available soon. Certainly I assume you'll be sharing our contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has after this, or if you're looking for particular kinds of resources, to direct you to those, because there are an abundant amount of resources available to help funders and donors.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you both have been so generous with your time and your wisdom, and it's just been such a wonderful opportunity to learn from you both. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined us live. You know, one of the things I love most about this community is the people that come, you know, they're here to learn, they're here to help, and it's amazing to have sessions like these. And so you know, as my company, Family Office Access, is now a part of ISS Market Intelligence. It's a large global company, but I'm encouraged, and it allows us to expand the reach. And you know, the foundation is our data, but it's really the people in the community that matter most. They're the heart of it all. So if you're curious to learn about our platform, or exploring simply how to engage with family offices more strategically, we'll drop information in the chat so you can learn more. And we appreciate your being here and hope you'll join us for our next session. Thank you.